Welcome now to Nice. It's stage 4 of the Tour de France, the team time trial. This is a crucial stage in the whole topography of the 3-week race. It's when the riders race in their teams of 9. There are 22 of them. They'll go at 4-minute intervals. And it's quite simple. The best time will win. And the first team to go is last in the team competition at the moment. And there they are, Argus Shimano. You may remember, though, they took out the first stage with Marcel Kittel. And they've lost a lot of time in the team race looking after him. But now a chance free to fly. They'll set the markers. Not a long way, Paul, in time trial distances, a mere 25 kilometres. But the time is so crucial.
Very, very crucial, Phil, as it was on the first day of this bike race, because the first team across the line at the end is the team that's going to get themselves the yellow jersey. They're rolling away now for 25 kilometres, 15 miles of the race. But the great thing that I like about a team time trial is it measures the strength and depth of a team. It's not about the individual here. It's about working together as a team. And you're only as strong as the weakest link in your chain.
That's right. But the time is taken on the 5th rider of the team to cross the line. And so 4 riders can ride as far ahead as they like, but until that 5th man gets there, the clock will keep on running. Well, you can tell now we're back in mainland France. We're going round the back streets of this beautiful town of Nice as they twist their way out onto the Promenade des Anglais, up towards Nice Airport. And we'll see the whole route during the course of our coverage. I think the most interesting aspect, I think we're poised for an exceptionally exciting time trial, Paul, because we're talking of 1 second at the moment advantage for the yellow jersey, Jan Bakelands. There's 90-plus riders in that 1 second gap. Somebody else could be grabbing yellow tonight, to this afternoon rather, quite easily. Now, difficult to hold a 9-man straight while I'm working unit on roads as narrow as this with plenty of turns.
The important thing, Phil, you have to remember about the team time trial is you've got to get the most that you can out of every rider in the team. Even the weakest guy in the team, you've got to get as much energy out of him as possible. The way it works is a rider will go to the front, he'll set the pace for as long as possible, keeping the pace as high as 31, 32 miles an hour. Once he starts to feel himself losing the pace, he slips back. As the rider's doing there, he slipped over to the left-hand side. He'll drop to the back of the line and slot in 9th position. And while he's in the slipstream, he can save up to 30% of his energy, and that keeps the pace nice and high. But what happens when you get down towards the end, riders start to weaken, but you must always remember you need to finish with 5 riders because the time is taken when the 5th rider crosses the line.
Now, the main contenders are down the bottom on the far right there. The man with the yellow jerseys in the Radio Shack team. That's the last team to start because he's the race leader. Just ahead of him is BMC. They contain TJ Van Garderen, Cadel Evans. They go at 10:35 Eastern Time. And then we look further up to teams like Orica Green Edge, who provided us with the winner yesterday in Simon Gerrans. Movistar with Alejandro Valverde, they go at 10:07. The Sky team also a little bit further, they go at 9:51, and they've got the possible overall favourite there in Chris Froome. So take a look as they go in 4-minute intervals. That means they're not going to catch one another on a course of 25 kilometres. The record, by the way, the nearest we can get to this distance was set when we raced in Les Essarts, over 23 kilometres, and the time they recorded, this average speed was 55.64 miles an hour. That's heading up towards 35 miles an hour. Now, the World Team Time Trial Champions will be the next team to go. There they are on the start line. It's a new event at the World Championships now. And in this team is Mark Cavendish, and there he is nearest camera left as we look at the pictures here. Sylvain Chavanel, 5 times the French national champion, also on the start line. It could be a good team, this. They was something of a surprise when they won the world title last year, but we can expect a good ride from them now.
Yeah, you've got, as you said there, Phil, Sylvain Chavanel, 5 times champion of France in the individual time trial. Tony Martin, 2 times champion of the world, but he's had to nurse himself through the first 3 days of this bike race after a very nasty crash. And when it comes down to the team time trial, Mark Cavendish, although he's better treated as a sprinter, is actually a very good team time trialist as well because he raced on the track.
Well, as they quickly get into their formation now and settle down, Michael Kwiatkowski is the rider in the white jersey up front. He is the highest placed rider in the Best Young Rider competition. So as we go back up to Argos Shimano, further along the Promenade des Anglais, beneath clear blue skies. Let's pick up first of all our predictions in the Cadillac Performance competition. This is the situation overall. We add together the British versus the Americans. So we've got 7, and Scott scored well yesterday with Peter Sagan to give the USA with Bob and Scott 3. That's the overall situation. Now let's have a look who we've all gone for today. I've gone for Garmin Sharp to repeat. They won last time we had a time trial here. Sky Pro Cycling is Paul's pick. Bob has gone for Cadel Evans' and TJ Van Garden's BMC team. And Scott has gone for the team we've just seen starting, the world champions, Omega Pharma Quickstep. Back out on course with Argos Shimano.
Well, you can see the rider sitting on the front there. He's the leader of this squad, and that, of course, is John Degenkolb. He's a very good sprinter. I expect to hear a lot more from him when we get out onto the flatter roads, and maybe going down to Marseille tomorrow.
So we're underway. 2 teams are on the road. In all, 22 teams go today. The way now, Steve, and we'll get the first gauge of how well they're going at the halfway, where Omega Pharma Quickstep still holds best time, 13 minutes and 16 seconds. Now you'll see the riders drop off who make a huge effort because their time doesn't matter, but the 5th man must hang on to the flyers here. Kwiatkowski on the front in the white jersey. This is the man, if they set the best time, who will be the next leader of the Tour de France. He's heading it up towards the line. Now here comes the time. The time to beat is 27:43 of Argos Shimano. They're going to be well inside that. Now this could be the time that might stand throughout the whole afternoon. They will hope so. 25:57.
That's almost a 2-minute beating of Team Argos Shimano. This is a solid squad, and it's the time trial champion of France who leads them to the line there, Sylvain Chavanel, followed by Kwiatkowski, the young riders leader. And so this is going to be a time, Phil, that will stand, I think, for a long, long time. Most certainly, I would say, up until the arrival of Garmin Sharp.
Now, this is Cofidis, the French team coming through. They lost a man yesterday in the youngster Yon Bagot. So there are only 8 of them here as they go through the check. It's still a very good ride by them. It's not going to be a winning ride, this one, but considering there's only 8 of them on the team, they're aiming at the 4th place. That's where they slot in with 13:58 at the midway.
Yes, but look at the average time, 58, almost 59 kilometers an hour for Omega Pharma Quickstep. That's just over 40 miles an hour average speed.
Yes, and that is a record for the team time trial in the Tour de France. So we're off record breaking already here. There is a wind blowing, but it's a breeze. And that ride by the world team time trial champions has really lifted the ball game with that average speed. Now this is the warm-up here. Richie Porte with the cotton wool up his nose there to help his breathing. These boys warming up in the white t-shirt there is Edvald Boysenhagen. They know the job here. Now the cotton in the nose there has got fluid on it to open up the nostrils and to get some good air into those lungs. Geraint Thomas, the one with the headset on nearest camera. The furthest one is already warming with Chris Froome. Now the thing is here with Geraint Thomas, he is the man that has a hairline fracture of the pelvis. And but he's the one. Chris Froome's in the white glasses, second from the left here. They're still to go, of course. And this team has set the trend. Best time so far. As the Bay of Angels shimmers here in Nice in the Mediterranean, the team time trial is underway. Garmin Sharp are not letting the side down. These are the riders on the way back now from the time check, and we can show you what they turned up at the check at 13 kilometers in. Challenging the time of Omega Pharma Quickstep, which is still the best time as they get around the corner, but only 4 seconds slower. Garmin Sharp have gone through, and that means I think they can lift that on the way back down to the finishing line. 4.47 seconds slower than what is still the best time by the Belgian team Omega Pharma Quickstep. Cofidis has finished, but not affected the leaderboard. They've slotted in with the 4th best time of 27:16.79. Still a very, very nice and tidy team down there from Garmin Sharp. Well, I'm just thinking that Garmin Sharp, if David Miller and the rest of the boys can slip in here, they might pull that 4 seconds out of the bag and come back with the best time.
Well, you know, they've got some strong riders in that squad up alongside them, and especially David Miller and Christian Vande Velde, two very good individual time trialists, and they will be hyper motivated to imagine, Phil, to try and put David Miller back into the yellow jersey after 13 years, and he will have that extra motivation himself when he starts to run down towards the finishing line.
And a real fast turn we saw there, the first point of Andrew Talansky, the young American on the front there, really did a long pull as we can get now the arrival of Euskaltel Euskadi. They're not a great team time trial team, but they're challenging for the back of the marker board here on the teams that have gone through. 13:41, 7th for them out of the 7 teams that have gone through, 8 teams that have gone through rather.
Yeah, but this is a team we'll see a lot more of in the latter part of the Tour de France this year in the mountains. Their first rendezvous will be the Pyrenees, then up to the Mont Ventoux, and then finally into the Alps. This is FDJ. Now, this is a very good ride by FDJ because they went through the checkpoint in 6th fastest time, and they've held and improved that over the second half of the course.
They've a slower start, but they've been building all of the way. So this is Française des Jeux is the full name, but they prefer to be called FDJ as they race up here, challenging the time of Cannondale. They might just get there, but might just not get there. As it comes, if Cannondale slips away, they'll get in ahead of their French rival Cofidis team as they come up to the line. Stops on the 5th place rider, 26:38, I think. We'll wait for confirmation on that.
Well, you can see the face of these riders now, their concentration. It's a very difficult discipline, and if you're a strong guy and you're in a good day, this is a great discipline to be in. But if you're having a bad day, like Geraint Thomas is probably having a nasty day for Team Sky, it is absolute agony. That's Chris Froome going around the corner. They're still keeping themselves nice and organised. They're starting halfway through the field. The last team to start will be Team Radio Shack because that's the team of the overall leader, but it's also the team that leads in the team classification. They start just 4 minutes behind Team BMC Racing. The advantage for those two teams is they will know the times that have been set out on the course.
Well, these are the teams starting now that Omega Pharma Quick-Step will be keeping a very, very close eye on now, because the team that does record the fastest time today of these top teams will provide the next leader of the Tour de France. That's how close it has been over 3 days in Corsica. Now we can watch the Kazakh team here, Astana, and if you don't know it, Astana is the capital of Kazakhstan, and hence the team name, as they now get themselves ready for the off. They're the 13th team to go of 22. Yanni Brackovic, their team leader, well known for his riding alongside Armstrong and his team in the old days. So as they break away now quickly into formation, and perhaps not as quickly as they might like to be here, but it's a difficult start. There's a whole series of corners through the narrow streets. It's around the marketplace and by the town hall in Nice before they can get out onto the better roads. They actually do go past Nice Airport. There's only one way into the airport at the moment. All the roads, other roads are closed to the airport. Meanwhile, behind the buses here, Alberto Contador with his yellow sunglasses on. Might be a bit premature yet for Alberto, but a good time today, and he'll move a lot closer up the overall standings. It will be Nicholas Roach, though, on the squad, who would pull on the jersey of leader if he was to set the best time today.
41 there, a former winner of the Tour de France, Andy Schleck, I have to say, is looking rather comfortable in this team time trial. This is not one of his favourite disciplines. He hates the individual time trial and a little bit more the team time trial, but he survived. The man who started the day in the yellow jersey, this man, Jan Bakelands, has enjoyed his day in Corsica yesterday. I will say he's had a very difficult time today because nobody can hide in the team time trial. It's a tough side of the sport.
Yes, and you can tell by his face here, a little bit resigned to what is about to happen. I think he did say he didn't anticipate keeping it today, but he's had 2 days of the most glorious days of his cycling career. Won his first ever bike race in his first ever Tour de France, and now has led the race for 2 days. Just struggling to maintain the wheel now is Markel Irizar, the Spanish rider. About holding his team inside. Bakelands has done well here. He stayed up all of the time. Long term, of course, they are thinking of Andy Schleck, the one. A good time for him.
Well, just looking at the time, they're at 2 kilometres to go. You can roughly add on 2 minutes to their time, so that gives them about a 26:30 finish. So they're not going to challenge Orica Greenedge at all here this afternoon. It is going to be Simon Gerrans, the new leader of this bike race overall.
Yes, but 26:30, that's a big loss of time for number 41. Andy Schleck against the men that matter on Sky and Saxo and Garmin. They're not at all ragged, but they're just not going quick enough as they race towards the line here. 25 minutes has been hit, and the best time is 25:56, and they're short of the kilometre kite, which will take another minute once they get there. So it looks as though they are actually losing probably the most time for Andy Schleck of the teams.
Yes, they actually performed pretty well in the first time check. They were just 11 seconds adrift, but I don't think they've managed to pick up the pace over the last part. I think Simon Gerrans now realises it's all over. The celebrations are about to begin. There's Stuart O'Grady.
Yes, but down at the finishing line, already Orica Greenedge are celebrating just to the left of our commentary position, while here on screen we're seeing the arrival of the erstwhile team leaders of the Tour de France and the individual leader who is bringing them home here in the yellow jersey. It's been a marvellous 2 days, a dream lived through for Jon Bekkelands, but now it is over, and the next maillot jaune of the Tour de France will be an Australian, and that will be Simon Gerrans as he now gets ready for the yellow jersey. It's not a great time, one has to say, by Radio Shack either, as they come up to the line, because for Andy Schleck he is losing more than a minute to men who will seriously attack him in the mountains. The final time 26:25, and only 11 of the 22 squads.
Well, actually, he only lost 28 seconds, Andy Schleck, there to the men in front of him. Probably the man most concerned was, of course, Chris Froome.
Daryl Impey giving a big hug to his teammate. This is very, very special for Orica Greenedge. Last year, when the first ever Australian team came into being, they won just about everything except a stage in the Tour de France. So this year, this is what they wanted. Matthew got there, realising the time isn't good enough. Daryl Impey on the right, Matt White, the coach, with the glasses on. Cameron Meyer, the youngster in his first tour, all smiles in the background. Neil Stevens on the right, former stage winner himself of the Tour de France. This is the moment. And let me remind you, the only other Australians ever to wear the yellow jersey: Phil Anderson, Stuart O'Grady, Bradley McGee, Robbie McEwen, and of course the only Australian to win the Tour de France, Cadel Evans. They just don't believe how they've turned this race around in the last 48 hours. Everything they planned has worked. Well, they hit the line. Congratulations were rife in the Orica Greenedge camp. The yellow dream over for Bekkelands, but all smiles for Simon Gerrans. How long will he keep it? We'll find out as you continue to follow the Tour de France with us here over the next 2.5 weeks. So the happiness of Simon Gerrans. The whole team gets presented here, Paul, because it is a team time trial. Simon Gerrans looking particularly good now, all smiles as if he's had just a little trip around without any problems. The whole team around him. Stuart O'Grady smiling, enjoying life with him. Can't believe it, can they?
Well, pretty interesting, because Stuart O'Grady, Phil, he could probably, well, in the old days, he could have gone home. He used to live in Monaco, which is not too far away from here. He's now actually moved up to the north of the continent to live in Luxembourg. But Simon Gerrans and Orica Greenedge, they've done a phenomenal job here this afternoon.
Yes, he spent a lot of miles training down here. I think Stuart felt he wanted a little bit of a more varied life for his family up in Luxembourg. That's why he moved away. But Simon Gerrans has found the team all around him, and we didn't see it all the way, but I bet you Cam Meyer was a powerhouse in that team time trial today in his first Tour de France as well.
Well, don't discount the power of Brett Lancaster either. It was a real mix of experience and youthful enthusiasm, I've had to say. Little piece of interest there, because Sven Tuft, the big time trialist from Canada, he will have been a strong man in that 9-man squad from Orica Green Edge.
Absolutely. The sprint that counted. He won in a sprint yesterday. Today they had to sprint to win a team time trial. 75 hundredths of a second. So the overall standing, Simon Gerrans ahead of Daryl Impey. In second place now, Michael Albacini, all on the same team, by the way. Then Kwiatkowski, who would have led, comes in at 4th place. Chavanel in 5th.
And he will wear the yellow jersey tomorrow on the roads of France.
So he salutes the crowd, becomes the 6th Australian wearer of the Maillot Jaune.
And Cagnes-sur-Mer behind them as they move inland behind Saint-Tropez. Go through the town of Fayence. There are a lot of rolling roads on the way down towards the finish in Marseille. The Col de Lange halfway through, then through the sprint pointed Lorgues, before a small incline on the outskirts of Marseille, which I don't think will bother too much the sprinters as they charge down to finish outside the Hippodrome, right alongside the Mediterranean.
Yes, there you can see just ripples today. There's not much wind around, and it should, if they catch this breakaway, of course, become a race for the sprinters. And we've got the best sprinters here this year, all of the fast men. Maybe Cavendish, maybe Sagan, or maybe Simon Gerrans. Back to you, Todd.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll get it to you momentarily. Once again, you are looking at the peloton. 6-man group has broken off the front. It's a 142-mile run into Marseille, and there's your leader of the race right now on course, Simon Gerrans, Orica Green Edge. 12 minutes, Bob. For the folks at home, that's a lot of time, and it's 142 miles. Too much time?
That's a huge chunk of time. I wouldn't want a breakaway to have 12 minutes if I had the yellow jersey in Tour de France. You know, 3-4 minutes, that's reasonable. 12 minutes is huge. We could see the jersey change hands again today.
As Steve Perino and Bob Key will tell you, to keep up with the Tour de France, you need the most advanced digital experience of its kind. Now for a limited...
To the route to the Tour de France, these are the Verdant Gorges here. They were carved out by the erosion of the river below, as we now are on a stage, the second longest of the race, this 142 miles, Paul.
Yes, a long stage, an undulating stage. These are very tough roads through the Arrière-Pays, the area just behind the Côte d'Azur and famous towns like Saint-Tropez. Most of these riders will know this course because they've ridden it in a race in the early part of the season, the Tour de Haute-Var. But this 6-man breakaway got clear very, very early on, built themselves an advantage at one stage of 12 minutes and 15 seconds. But now all of a sudden, as it drops down to 10 minutes 23 seconds, it's obviously Orica Green Edge who are in command at the front of the peloton.
The man at the back, Yukiya Arashio, twice the champion of Japan, the latest just over a week ago, winning the title and proudly wearing the national champion's jersey here. As they're working well together. The maximum lead they've held after just 24 miles of racing was 12 minutes and 45 seconds. It is on the descendancy, but it's still well over 10 minutes as we look at the riders. A little bit of cloud around today. Let's have a look at the weather report presented by Palmer's Cocoa Butter Formula for Men. 77, so he's staying nice and warm, light winds around, cloudy, hint of rain occasionally. I tell you what, this morning, Paul, they were lucky because there was quite heavy rain at the finish line for about an hour.
Yes, but once the tide started to change, although there's not much of a tide in the Mediterranean, the weather has started to clear up. I think everybody will be very happy now that once they come down to the finish line, it will be nice and dry for the riders coming into this sprint. I expect it to be a bunch sprint today, but there's just one slight problem. 6 riders up the road by 10 1/4 minutes. And in fact, Orica Green Edge doing the job now and starting to pull that gap down. They realised 12 minutes was getting to quite a large margin. That's around about 10 kilometres or 6 miles, the difference physically between the breakaway group and the main field.
Yes, they're bound for the beautiful town of Draguignan at the moment. The breakaway has gone through. Now let's have a look how the Cadillac Performance predictions are going today. Norwegian flags fly, and they'll be delighted to know yesterday the champion of Norway, Thor Hushovd, the God of Thunder, we usually see him in the Tour de France, won the 3rd stage of the Tour of Austria. So the Norwegian enjoying a different tour in the month of July this year.
Yellow helmets donned for Team Orica Green Edge here. They are the leaders not only in the race on the individual standard with their man Simon Gerrans, but they're also the leaders in the team classification as well after winning that team time trial yesterday by 0.76 of a second was the official time gap back to Omega Pharma Quick-Step. And I do have to feel, Phil, that they got the advantage of knowing that the time that they had to beat, the time of the winning the leading team is on the gantry over the finishing board. And if you go back and have a look at how these guys sprinted up to the line yesterday, they knew the time that they had to beat. I wonder if it had been the other way around, would Omega Pharma Quick-Step have been able to accelerate as well?
Well, they certainly did well. Simon Gerrans said his radio wasn't working. He hadn't a clue, but he could see the finishing board, so he did know what needed to be done. Stuart O'Grady is the pacemaker and has been for some miles now on the front. He's the second oldest man in the race. He's 38. He's riding a record-breaking 17th Tour de France. And here he is again on a team with the leader on it. And he himself has worn the yellow jersey in the years gone by. It's his job now, Paul, just to keep on a steady tempo and location of that breakaway.
What they want to do now is to start to slowly eat into the advantage of the six-man breakaway, and they realise because today is certainly a day for the sprinters, once they can get that gap down to the 4 or 5 minute mark with 50 or 60 kilometres to go, they realise, Phil, that then they will get assistance from the teams of the sprinters.
So as the riders continue to set the pace up, Stuart O'Grady on the front of the peloton, the 6 riders away off the front. They'll be lining up for the only sprint on course coming up next. Still just over 10 minutes, but it is coming down. They had over 2 3/4 minutes more than they're holding now, so they're paying particular attention. They've decided how far they want this breakaway to go before they start to peg its gains. Not really chasing it down. Now we're heading up to the green jersey sprint out on course as usual. We pass through it at 62 miles, 1 kilometre to go for the breakaway. Again, nobody really contesting the green jersey competition, but they will steal the top points because there are 6 of them here. It means the peloton will be racing for 7th place and 9 points. But as we have seen on all of the stages so far, Marcel Kittel, Greipel, Peter Sagan, they're the ones who seem to be really intent on picking up these midway points.
No, most certainly the sprinters have to fight. Peter Sagan, as you said, leads that competition. He's the defending champion, but breathing down his neck is Marcel Kittel, and Kittel knows that he has to try and get himself points in these intermediate sprints and on the flat stage, because he also knows that there are days when Peter Sagan will outclimb the sprinters and get into the front group.
There's 17 points separating Marcel Kittel from Peter Sagan. Sagan's got the green jersey on his shoulders. He won it last year. And the first rider would get 20 points, but there's only 9 points available for the 7th place. So Peter Sagan's pretty safe. But I still, because his consistency pays off over 3 weeks, expect the sprinters to go even for 7th place today.
There's Thomas de Gent in the blue jersey there at the front, and they started to wind it up a fraction. I think he wants. I think he's looking for the money there,
because Thomas de Gent has launched a sprint here and is being chased by Lutsenko and it's Lutsenko, the under-23 world road race champion. I think just being pipped there by Thomas de Gent to go to the photo finish. But De Gent made it look rather casual. One thing, normally when you're in a breakaway, you get people at the front sharing out the prizes. But so far, De Gent has taken all 3 prizes on offer. 2 climbs and the sprint.
Clean pair of wheels there for Thomas de Gent. A nice crowd turning out here into the very picturesque village of Provence. In fact, this place used to be fortified way back in the 16th century. And they suffered very often at the hands of the marauding Saracens who came up to try and conquer Provence.
So as we pan out across the fields here of the department of the Var, we'll take another break. As you'd imagine, we'll be a little bit closer to the breakaway when you return.
Same thing. I was actually pulled back into the Tour de France as we come through 1K to go to the sprint.
Well, we're just 500 metres from the sprint. We'll continue that thought in a moment now, because Greipel is attempting to be led out by his team here now. And watch out for the all-green jersey of Peter Sagan. It's dodging in the shadows. Greipel's 3 men down on the left of our picture. Cavendish has got his wheel. Sagan has got Mark Cavendish's wheel. That's 500 to go, so it was a little bit further out of the line now, so the sprint has been opened up here. Now Greipel has been doing very well in these intermediate sprints. He was the rider left standing in the road originally with no gears the other day. Now who's going to come? Sagan is trying to force his line on the left of our picture. Greipel's going to break late. He comes up to 100. He goes right over to the right, the left as we now look. It's amazing how he can produce the finish. I think given a real run at the line, Andre Greipel, you know, is going to really be a threat at the finish. And that would have been Christoph in the red jersey on the right here.
Yeah, but you'll notice, Phil, that Marcel Kittel did not come out of the pack there this afternoon. He's banking everything on the last sprint of the day.
Maybe he's already conceded the green jersey and feels stage wins count for more. We'll find out when we get down to Marseille today. There's the peloton, all totally disinterested. So just have a look at this again. Cavendish and is in the white middle. Oh dear me. Sagan thought he'd try and squeeze through. No movement by Mark Cavendish, and an apology coming from Peter Sagan. So all friendly in love and war there. The peloton just go through, no worries for them, and the race goes on.
Anderson was the first non-European ever to wear the yellow jersey at the Tour de France.
Yes, 1982 I think it was, and I was there unfortunately. A long time ago. They used to wonder who Phil Anderson was, but he soon let them know. Still a great credit as a top cyclist, a fit man, Phil Anderson. Peloton continues on now, 8:04, slowly but surely closing in. It's a long line now as the Orica boys, with the interruption of a couple of sprinters' teammates now, and I think more will be sent up as the finish approaches.
Yeah, we're starting to get into the ripples around the outskirts of Marseille. None of these climbs I think will worry the riders. They climb up to a high spot of 418 meters above sea level, but these are really more undulations rather than climbs themselves. There's two little climbs on the run in towards the finish within the last 30 kilometers. The Côte de Bastide is the last categorized climb of the day at 5 kilometers long. And then the Côte de la Gineste, which will then allow the riders to plummet down into Marseille. And it should be a very, very fast approach to the line. But having looked at the last 5 kilometers, it's a very safe run in towards the finish for the sprinters. Nice wide boulevards.
Just over 3.5 hours in the lead. The breakaway going away today after just 3 kilometers of the stage. They've got a bit of a hand now in the pacemaking, because they want the stage win for the sprinters, while Orica Green Edge simply wants to bring it all together. Seven minutes 53 seconds, 80 kilometers, 50 miles to go now.
Well, that will take these riders less than 2 hours, because they will speed up and ride in excess of 50 kilometers an hour on the run towards the finish.
Brief little applause there for the riders they went through. Awful long way to ride out front today, and I haven't seen anybody missing a turn. They're all still going pretty well, working well together here. The Euskaltel-Euskadi rider is Romain Sikar, world under-23 road race champion in 2009. He had a very good season in 2009. He was with the Orbea Continental team, and on the basis of that season he was signed up by the World Tour teams. He's yet to win a race in the World Tour team, but this is the first year we've seen him really find himself this year, so maybe he's settling in now.
Well, although he's a Basque by origin, he was born in France in Bayonne on January the 1st, 1988. And when he won the World Championships back in 2009, everyone thought he was going to be the next best thing on the French international circuit.
Today he can prove it. Just looking down through the trees, most of the green jerseys merging with the woods here as we come up towards Brignoles with the peloton. Orica Green Edge riders, and he's just got the workhorses on the front for the other teams at the moment. This is Marcel Seberg setting the pace, and it's reflecting but hovering now. They've held at 7:55 for quite a few kilometers here. A little bit of a problem now too, as this looks like Albert Timmers at the back. Yes, it is, number 198 there.
And Tom Dumoulin.
First time a ride for Tom Dumoulin is the Abbey of Celle.
This is a very, very old abbey, because the monks who founded this priory founded it way back in 1056. It was originally known as the monastic church of Santa Marie. Later on in the 11th century, the convent on this site was founded, and for more than 500 years they were granted land rights to the area.
And they're still there as the peloton files through the narrow streets here. Argo Shimano have not fared too well as a team since they won the first day, but they've still put themselves on the leaderboard with that great win on day one by Marcel Kittel.
The Montagne de l'Aube. This is the part of the Santa Boma Massif, which can be seen from the outskirts of Marseille. It tops out at 830 meters. It overlooks the climb that we'll go over in a couple of kilometers' time, the climb of La Roquebroussanne, and not far away from the Isole Plateau. It gets its name from the form of the rocks, which look like the teeth of a forester's saw.
And we actually saw that last night, driving down the autoroute. Off to our right shoulder, it stands out like a spine right along the ridge.
Well, in fact, these are very similar geology to the Dolomites. In fact, this is a dolomitic rock, which is why it's eroded the way that it has done.
Meanwhile, if the riders get on with their job here, cheered all the way along the route today.
Some magnificent outcropping, which you can see actually from the heart of Marseille, especially from where we're sitting here. And this area around here goes right down to the Mediterranean coast. And in fact, nestled in a little bay not too far away from where we are is the beautiful little fishing town of Cassis, where you can go right down to the water's edge and you can just buy the fish from the fishermen at the side of the water.
Well, one or two people have done well to climb up there to put those radio masts, I must say. As we skim over the top here, Broom, Boxwood, Phoenician junipers, and finally Aleppo pine and Scots pine are the trees which grow on that mountain. A bit of a chat going on. Thomas Agent at the back,
trying to figure out who's chasing in the main field. He's a seasoned professional, Thomas Agent. He will know that he'll get chased down towards the end, but because of the fact that he's so far down in the overall standings, I'm sure that he'll be looking for these breakaway moves on a regular basis. He hasn't shown the form yet this season that he had last year that took him to third place overall in the Giro d'Italia.
This is the third climb of the day, and what's happened here? This is Radio Shack swapping wheels.
Well, there's a little. They were both riding together, but looked like it was a slight touch of wheels.
His chain's off. Did they both come down? We only saw them pull over to the side. It's Kloden's off to the right. Jens Voigt is on the left, just off our picture at the moment. Andreas Kloden is his saddle is completely twisted, so I think they probably did collide. This is Jens Voigt waiting to see what the decision is, so he can pace them back to the peloton, with the convoy still going by here.
He's on a spare bike.
Yeah, spare bike. It's Andreas Kloden there who starts off, and Jens, well, you can't get a bigger motor than that. Empty roads ahead though, so that was a bit of a long stop. 7 minutes 43 seconds is the gap at the moment, and just 76 kilometers now left to ride. As we look here at these two riders, up front is Jens Voigt setting the pace. Andreas Kloden is the guy behind. Appears to have crashed. His seat pin was twisted and his chain was off. Jens Voigt immediately stopped with him to make sure he was okay, and now they've got to chase back.
Well, he obviously damaged his bike a fair amount there because he's swapped onto a new machine, but he'll use his teammate Jens Voigt for as long as possible. The important thing is energy when it comes to races like the Tour de France. You've got to conserve energy all the time. No chance to look at the magnificent views on either side of you as you make your way through the heart of Provence and think about the race finish down towards the end. But Jens Voigt and Andries Kloden, I think, will have a hard chase to get themselves back into the main field. But if you're going to get paced by a motorbike, you might as well have it with the name of Jens Voigt on it.
Well, we're on the climb, and it's only a short fourth category, the Roc Brussan. Now let's see if Thomas de Gendt continues a clean sweep of the wins here. He's won everything so far.
He's got 2 points on the first climb of the day, 1 point on the next climb of the day. There's only 5 points available on today's stage, and so there's going to be no challenge at all to the man who leads the King of the Mountains classification overall, Pierre Rolland, who initially had said he wasn't interested in trying to win that classification, but once he saw the chance of defending his lead, he certainly took it.
Yes, and he'll hold on for it and keep dragging in the publicity as long as he can. Of course, it's the big mountains hovering on the horizon, the Pyrenees, which will be the first real contenders for that competition. They should come out and play then. 7 minutes 35 seconds. De Gendt is on the front. Fourth category is the lowest of the categorized climbs. They begin outside category 1, 2, 3 and 4. So these are the easiest, and for that reason only the winner of the climb gets any points in the King of the Mountains. Sicard just taking a drink, not interested what's going on up front on the climb. And still making the way through off camera. We've got the 2 riders on Radio Shack making the way back through the convoy of cars up towards the peloton. Nice little crowd splattered around the roadside here on the Côte de Roc Brussan.
Well, it's always very difficult in a race, especially when you've got a breakaway off the front and you've got a bunch of teams starting to put the pressure on. And if you have a mechanical incident, as Andries Kloden did a little while back, trying to get the main field, you have to take your time and you don't panic. The most important thing is you just keep moving up through the cars and moving one car at a time, taking a little bit of advantage of the slipstream until eventually you get to the referee's car, and then you pop onto the back end of the main field. And once you've made contact with the back end of the main field, if you're a guy who's a big overall contender, the first thing you want to do is to try and get straight back up to the front end of the main field and make sure that you don't get involved in any other little incidents.
Just half a kilometre up now. Watch out for number 203, flexing his legs on the right there, Thomas de Gendt. He's thinking longer term, I think. He can't get the lead in the King of the Mountains today, but he is a very good climber in the high mountains as well. Finishing third in last year's Tour of Italy, so he might be thinking short term to get some points now, longer term to get the bigger points later.
Well, that seems to have been his tactic since the start. He was first over the Côte de Châteauneuf-Grasse after 22 kilometres, first over the Col de Lange. Now he's lining up for this one, and that's de Gendt in the blue jersey with the yellow colouring on it.
74.7 kilometres, almost the same second that Omega Pharma Quick-Step lost the team time trial by yesterday. Arishiro is having a little dig for the top, and de Gendt is not going to challenge him for this one. So it is Arishiro who takes the only point available over the top. Little break in the pattern now.
Yes, Arishiro, the Japanese national champion, participating in his 4th Tour de France as they go over the top of the climb. And the gap is down to 7.5 minutes.
Yes, 7.5 minutes. When they went over the top of the first climb of the day, the peloton were 12 minutes and 15 seconds behind. So they've taken a long time, but they've pulled back 5 minutes of the advantage. Now, this is the situation at the back of the race there. Quite clearly, Kloden did fall. As we're just looking, there was a crash. That's Jaime Zubeldia, is number 49. This is Andries Kloden. I wonder if they collided. He's got his elbow bandaged up. It was off our cameras, and all of a sudden we just saw Kloden standing on the roadside, but it looks as though they may well have collided with each other here. Anyway, while they're in the peloton, they'll be safe. They're both going back together up to the main field now. The 2 Radio Shack riders had the race lead for 2 days with Jan Bekkelants. having a little discussion about it now, but they seem to be getting it all together again now, as Andries Kloden says to Zubeldia, let's get back up to the race as the gap continues to come down. Approaching now just 7.5 minutes the advantage. Yes, there's no doubt the Tour de France is the toughest bicycle race in the world. Some would say the toughest annual sporting event in the world, and you have to beat the daily time limits to get to ride the next day, no matter what happens to you along the way. And as we look at the peloton here, the riders are continuing on asunder. 7 minutes 20 is now the gap. Just as we watch the peloton here, Paul, just listen to that discussion about with Jens Voigt at the finish line this morning. He does say, you know, you've got to bring a little bit of humanity into this. Jens saying that he got eliminated once through the Galibier in the Alps by 42 seconds. Now he says there was discussion. Was he 7 seconds or was it less? I mean, how do you feel? Because you yourself, you're one of the few guys I know who actually was allowed back in.
Well, I wasn't eliminated for 7 seconds. I was eliminated for 20 minutes outside the elimination time. And there are several contingencies that the race referees have to be able to allow you back into the race. First of all, the amount of courage and energy you show to stay involved in the bike race.
Right,
I have to say, Ted King should definitely be in it. And also, if there's a problem on the road, and that was definitely the case when I was trying to finish at the top of a mountain outside of Pontarlier, and all of the race cars and some of the journalists, including your good self, were coming down.
For you.
But I think you've got to use the rules and interpret the rules. And I mean, yesterday I think the judges were very, very fierce, not only with Ted King, but we mentioned in the coverage yesterday that the French champion, the French former time trial champion, Jean-Claude Perrault, he had his French bands on his jersey. Well, you're not allowed to in the team time trial. They fined him €200 for that. Yeah. And the world champion, Tony Martin, in the individual time trial, had the world champion bands on his bike. Well, they gave him a 1,600 euro fine for that. So, I mean, you know, a little bit of sense, you know, why, you know, I think he should have been allowed to stay in the race myself for 7 seconds. And, well, anyway, I know the rules are the rules, but as far as I'm concerned, the rules are there sometimes to be interpreted.
Well, I used to be an international referee. I would have found it very hard to have kicked him off the race, knowing the full picture. He was dropped the minute the race started down the ramp. He had to ride the whole race, which was 25 kilometres over 15 miles, at speeds exceeding 35 miles an hour, which on your own against the teams of 9 is pretty nigh impossible. And it was a record speed, the fastest team time trial in the history of the Tour de France, and they kick him out for just 7 seconds. I think it was a bit hard when he's injured like he was.
Well, add to that as well, for because of his injury, he actually couldn't even ride his low-profile time trial bike. He rode his normal road bike with a bunch of clip-on bars in the middle, so he was handicapped any which way you looked at it. And for 7 seconds, come on, guys.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you know, it is the Tour de France. It is the hardest bike race in the world, and as Bob Roll said earlier, it's not always fair either. So the race goes on, of course, sadly, with taking in his first Tour de France. He was terribly upset this morning. Now we're taking in our picture now Geraint Thomas, who's also in trouble with a hairline fracture of his pelvis.
But this is a man who is riding with a hairline fracture in his pelvis. He actually did some work in the team time trial yesterday, not over the first half of the course, over the first 13 kilometres, but when they reached the turn and started to come back, he pulled a few times at the front to try and help Team Sky get themselves that victory. But I've noticed today he's been riding a lot closer to the front, and he's going through basically a lot of pain management.
So I think that'll be disputed for a long time, that conversation. But rules are the rules, and it's quite clearly written in the case of the team time trial. If you are 25% slower than the winner's time of the day, you are out of the Tour, and that's what they stuck to. Meanwhile, Orica Greenedge, the men who in fact eliminated Ted King, are working very hard at the front. Well, Kampmeier looking even more urgent than he did earlier. As he switched the back, here's a puncture, this one. Just for the moment, this is in the breakaway. Romain Sicard, back wheel for him.
That's a bit of bad luck. That's a fairly slow rear wheel change there for him. I would have expected him to get off the bike. It makes it very difficult for the mechanic while the rider is sitting on the machine there for the mechanic to get the wheel in, but he's up and running. I would expect the group will probably wait for him because there's still 61 kilometres to go, and they know that 6 pairs of legs is a lot better.
I made that 23 seconds, Paul. That's not very good. But there we are. He's on his way. The crowd were very animated in giving him a good cheering send-off.
Yeah, normally a good rear wheel change would be 15 to 18 seconds. You would expect to be inside of 10 seconds for the front wheel.
23 seconds. Let me see. That's what Cadel Evans lost to Chris Froome in the team time trial yesterday. That's what it represents.
Well, he's going to have a hard chase to get himself back into the leading group of 6, but looking back down at the main field, they're having a hard ride down there too, because look at the length of the main field. The chase now, Phil, is certainly on in earnest. The sprinters are now starting to contemplate how are they going to handle the run down towards the finish. It's been, although on the profile it looks like a fairly flat stage, I can tell you it is quite up and down and quite lumpy in this part of the world, and it's a very, very difficult place to race through.
Particularly so in the last sector is more lumpy than the earlier sectors on as they continue on. I'm just I'm a little bit concerned here about Nansah Bouhanni, because he's at the back of the race again, the sprinter on FDJ, and he's been back here quite a lot today.
Yes, he has spent a long time. There's a problem with the Skyrider down just to go around the corner there. There was a Skyrider just pulling off to the left-hand side of the road with an incident.
Popped under the church there. We can't see who it is at the moment. They've just spotted him on race radio, and he's got a flat tyre, whoever he is. And we're not going to find out at the moment. But there was the referees came around the corner and saw him, and they just said there's a Skyrider with a flat tyre on the left of the road. But that's all we were told. And there's the service now taking place.
It's Geraint Thomas.
Geraint Thomas. So that's when your luck is out, isn't it? Poor Geraint here. But again, no real panic. But you see how painful it is to put his leg over that saddle.
Well, there's the second Sky team car there. And it's really difficult for him to get going. And bear in mind, this is a man who's riding through the Tour de France with a hairline fracture in his pelvis.
He can't even get out of the saddle. He's got to just wind it up. You can feel the pain. Mum, look away back home.
But this guy is a serious talent. Two-time Olympic gold medalist. He forgave the Tour de France last year because he wanted to prepare himself for the Olympic Games at home in the United Kingdom. And he did very well because he came away with a gold medal in the team pursuit. And he doesn't want to abandon the Tour de France this year, Phil, because he said he'd made so many sacrifices to slim down and lose weight, because a track cyclist is a lot more bulky than a road cyclist. And what he did was he slimmed himself down, he got himself fit for the Tour de France, and he wants to get through as much as possible, not just for himself, but also for the team.
Yeah, he's so unlucky because no teammates have waited back with him, you see. And the cars, you know, are rushing through. He's going to have to try and get behind one of them because they're flying now at the moment, as you can see from the front. They are just moving so quickly. They've got to watch it at the back with there's so much traffic down there as well.
It's always very, very precarious, and he's going to have to hope that he can find a bit of help from one of the team cars. With this injury that he's got, he's having a hard time getting out of the saddle, so he's got to accelerate gradually to get himself up to maximum speed. But the thing that he said, the only problem that he's got is the pain. It's a question of being able to manage the pain. He'll take it day by day until he figures out whether he can stay in this bike race or not. But every day that goes by is a day that will help him recover and improve. And the doctors have told him that by staying in the Tour de France, it's not going to aggrieve that problem that he's got, and he will actually start to get better.
Well, meanwhile up front, don't let us forget that there is still Romain Sicard. He's now 12 seconds behind, rejoining the breakaway. He lost something like 23 in the change, so he's half the deficit. Oh, well, he's arrived now. He just flashed into our camera, so he has rejoined the leaders. And Alexei Lutsenko, the current world under-23 road race champion, slips in behind Sicard, the 2009 version of that event.
Well, the race is starting to hot up quite a fraction, because in the fourth hour of the race, we've covered 42.9 kilometers an hour. That's 26 miles an hour. So it is starting to get a lot hotter and a lot faster in the breakaway group. But the main field are also looking rather aggressive.
Geraint Thomas has found his team car. They've told him how he's feeling as he starts to move back up through the team cars now. So he will get back into the race. A painful return indeed.
Now, the big problem that Geraint Thomas has is the fact that pain in his pelvis is preventing him from getting out of the saddle to accelerate. But I think once he actually gets the body warmed up, we saw him in the team time trial yesterday, Phil. In the first 13 kilometres, he wasn't able to participate in any of the pacemaking, but once his body got warmed up, once the muscles got warmed up, he actually did a fair number of turns on the running back down towards the finish. Just notice on his right hand sleeve there as well, he's got the Union flag there. That's to indicate that he's a former national champion of Great Britain, but I think more importantly than that, he's a two-time gold medalist at the Olympic Games on the track.
A little bit of an uphill here, unofficial one this, as we round it out now to 7 minutes. So as they continue on, it looks as though Andre Greipel is feeling particularly good today. He's sending a lot of members of his team up towards the front to try and bring back those 6 escapees. Town of Carcès, near the ruins of its castle, are a number of houses with tombeauil paintings on the exterior. This technique of painting is described as using realistic imagery to create the illusion that objects exist in 3 dimensions. I think we'll agree there. More often used in stage theatre set design to depict a great usage of space, the paintings on the houses in Carcès are truly unique to this Var region. And now, not too far away from the Var's most extensive municipality of Signes, the peloton speed towards it. The leaders are already through the town. And this is still Geraint Thomas trying to rejoin through the cars again. But at least now he can take a few breathers on this sweeping descent and watch out for that central medium strip there. One more big effort. Road race champion back in 2010. Mark Cavendish, by the way, is the current road race champion. Won in Glasgow just before the Tour de France started. And Geraint Thomas didn't deserve a flat tyre after all of his problems over the last few days, but he's repaired it again and he's coming back up to the back of the bunch. And when he gets there, the gap is going to be just 6 3/4 minutes. So while he's been away, they've taken away another minute of the advantage of the leaders.
Well, to give you an idea of the power that this man has, he was in the team pursuit at the Olympic Games last year. He decided not to ride the Tour de France. Not only did the British quartet go on the way to winning the Olympic Games, they set a brand new world record as well. 3 minutes and 52 seconds for 4 kilometres.
Yes, the fastest in the world at the time. And as they continue on, the race now running into the last part of the stage. Just one climb to come, and then it's a 30 kilometres, 19-mile plunge. Well, not exactly a plunge onto the flatlands approaching Marseille itself. And there's a split, and it's come pretty early on here. Caught them all off guard at the back. Romain Sicard sitting at the back. Kevin Retzer is here, and also Anthony Delaplace. As the split has been forged by the hard-working Thomas de Gendt, the most experienced man in the breakaway, and he doesn't want this breakaway to be caught.
Well, it's funny how this split has actually happened on a climb which is not categorised in the race handbook here this afternoon. This is the small climb as it takes the riders away from Signes. So now we're down to 3 and 3. And as you can see just in front there, Delaplace, the green and white jersey of Sodja Sund, keeps looking over his shoulder for a little bit of assistance. But I think the lights are starting to go out for Romain Sicard, Delaplace and Kevin Retzer. As you said, Thomas de Gendt knows this is the crucial part of the game now as we start to get to the 53 kilometre to go mark. That's 33 miles of racing left. It's come inside of 6 minutes and 43 seconds, but every time we look back at the main field, you can see you can almost physically see the difference between the speed in the leading group and the peloton.
They might get back. They've got themselves organised again. They're leaving all the work to Delaplace, though, and that might be wrong. Don't forget that Romain Sicard's only just got back here from his problems, and he's going to be tired. And they may have sensed this in the breakaway. They've had to attack to try and split it up and get on with the job, because they still have a chance at 52 kilometres to maintain. It would be a very close finish, but this is the move by Retzer. Try to go and see, and Sicard just has not recovered from that chase. He can't cope. Delaplace trying to bridge the gap. Retzer's going to get across, but I'm not sure that Delaplace is.
Well, this was the point where Retzer said, well, there's no more power left with these two guys, and I'm not going to get left behind having been in the breakaway. He was actually very present in the early season race at the Flèche Brabazon, which was won by his own teammate Thomas Voeckler, and that was, I think, one of those performances which allowed him to be selected for the Tour de France Team for Europe car this year. He's got across the gap. They got across the gap quite smartly. 4 men now at the front.
We need a couple of seconds for a few deep breaths, though, after an effort like that to bridge, but he has bridged. Comes upon the back wheel of Lutsenko, who doesn't celebrate his 21st birthday until September. Very young age to be riding the Tour de France. The youngest winner of the Tour de France was Henri Cornet. He was 20 years of age back in 1904. And he didn't even know he'd won for 3 or 4 months, because he'd actually finished in 5th place in Paris. And then, after an investigation, they disqualified the first 4 riders for cheating. And so he was given the victory by post, I would imagine.
I'm just looking at the lavender here. You might just have noticed that canal we went over a few moments ago. That was the Provence Canal. It was started in 1957. And the idea was to take water away from the Verdon River to supply regions in the south of France, which in the past have been seriously struck by drought. And 40% of the Marseille water actually comes through that canal.
.38 kilometers to go, 24 miles at Couche-les-Pins, and 4 minutes 52 seconds is the gap. It's going to be touch and go today if they do bring these riders back. But there is still hope, and they're going to rely heavily on the little slope of the Côte des Bastides, with 19 miles to go to start the real chase down. Lotto are quite concerned now for André Greipel. And Lotto Belisol, they've been doing a lot of the work now, Paul, 45% of the chasing, because I think Greipel, I honestly think he's the fastest of all of the guys right now, but he's never been there to use his sprint yet.
Well, that's the thing. I think he's the strongest of all of the sprinters, not necessarily the fastest. He's definitely a man who sprints with sheer power. Cavendish, on the other hand, he sprints with an incredible aerodynamic position, and that's what has managed to make him the fastest man in the world. But sprinting is not necessarily about being the strongest or the fastest. It's also about being in the right place at the right time and making sure that you're not boxed in. Because bear in mind, you've got 30 or 40 guys that spread all the way across the road, and you've got to find the door open in front of you towards the finishing line. And that's the knack of being in the right place and keeping yourself not blocked in.
Yes, it's quite busy with traffic in the sprint, and the sprint is not a particularly wide finish, by the way, so you've got to be in a good position as you approach the actual line, last 300 or 400 meters. Otherwise it will be difficult to get through the melee of the riders.
That's why, again, coming across to what you were saying about André Greipel, I think I give André Greipel the slight advantage over Mark Cavendish, because he has a very good lead-out train. Now, to win a sprint, the ideal preparation is to have a number of riders from your team who will pace you a little bit like in a record attempt in track and field over a 5,000 meters or 10,000 meters, where somebody is the sacrificial lamb and paces you up to the final few laps, when you can then take out on your own and go for that world record or that national record. That's exactly how you want to try and place your sprinter, releasing him to unleash his sprint at 300 or 400 meters to go. And that's where Team Lotto have got a great organization. But Cavendish is definitely one of those guys who can either come from a lead-out train or try and win the sprint using his own devices.
Well, it's Cameron Meyer who has returned to the front here to lift up the pace for the Orica Green Edge squad again. For the riders, though, they are approaching the last climb of the day, the Côte des Bastides, which will put them into the last 30 kilometres of the race. They're about 5 kilometres from that climb. Are these boys going to make it?
Chavanel on the front. That was the left-hand sweeper at 2 kilometres to go to the finish. Communication shouting amongst the riders from Omega Pharma Quickstep. At the start of the season, Cavendish was always complaining about his team not being good enough, but now I think he's got the team that he wants at 2 kilometres to go.
A little more than 1 mile here, 1 mile to go, and everybody trying to get through, while the sprinters teams are trying to control it just for their man. Lotto Belisol, who've done a lot of the work today, are believing that André Greipel is their sprinter to get through to the finish.
Well, they've got control now a little bit further back. You can just see the white jersey there of Andre Greipel. Mark Cavendish has been swept away a fraction, but he's still got Tony Martin over on the right-hand side, so they're just trying to keep him and prevent him from getting boxed in. You've also got Ferrari in there as well, Roberto Ferrari from Team Lamprey. He's had a couple of contretemps with Mark Cavendish in the past. Cavendish is holding it calm, but you know, it looks to me as if he's getting himself boxed in now. They're moving out.
But is this a sign of the future of pro racing? Because the number of teams mixing it in the old days, it was 1 or 2. Now there's 5 or 6 teams all believing they have the sprinter who can finish it off, and not least Lotto at 1 kilometre to go now. Cavendish, he goes over to the right. He's still got plenty of lead-out men on the right. Greipel is on the right as we look at the picture now. He's got plenty of lead-out men.
He has. He's got Seberg in first position, Greg Henderson in second position, Greipel's in third, but now the Omega Pharma Quick-Step team are starting to turn up. The turbo is whistling quite nicely. They know there's a left-hand sweeper at 500 metres to go, and it'll be Gert Steegmans, the big man, right in front of Mark Cavendish, who takes the corner. The sweeper in third position.
Cavendish sweeps round to the left. He is in a perfect position to win this, but can he finish it off? Gert Steegmans starts, but the interruption comes from Lotto Belisol. As they look for each other, they're looking for Greipel, but behind Steegmans is the smaller figure of the British champion, Mark Cavendish. Is this going to be number 24? Because you never stop the missile when you fire him this close to the line. Cavendish comes up towards the line. He's challenged by Greipel. 2 ex-teammates, shoulder to shoulder. Mark Cavendish gets it. The first win of this year's Tour de France. He's 24th in history, and a terrible crash have touched the line on the run-in.
Well, that was just around that final sweeping bend. It was safe up at the front end of the main field, but this is just how dangerous it can be on the run into the finish line.
Michael Shaw, the champion of Switzerland. Maxime Bouet, who lives here in Marseille, is on the right of the picture. I know his wife is waiting here at the finishing line, number 83 there. That's a great shame, but Mark Cavendish will have known nothing about that. He has won his first stage of the Tour de France this year.
Well, as you look at this, Cavendish, when he gets into that low-profile sprinting position of his, is almost unbeatable. Greipel had a good lead out. Sagan was right up there as well. There is Ferrari in the pink jersey, but this is win number 24 over his history with the Tour de France for Mark Cavendish.
And Pierre Rolland down again. Arashiro looking at a leg wound by the look of it, maybe just a scrape, but Pierre Rolland, the king of the mountain, and all of the riders who fell under the rules, they will not lose any time at all. So they still hold the position and advantage or disadvantage as they confirm Mark Cavendish the winner ahead of Edvald Boysenhagen of Sky there. And that seems to be who Sky were working for today to try and deliver him to the finishing line. He got second in the final rush.
Well, there is the Virgin Mary and Child at the summit of Notre Dame de la Garde, which looks down on the harbour.
Well, what an incredible sprint. Let's take a look at that sprint finish again here. Greipel looked good there on the right-hand side of the road in the white jersey, but then he realised as Boysenhagen comes up on Greipel's shoulder, Cavendish breaks. These are all ex-teammates of Mark Cavendish, and Cavendish showing them no respect because they know his speed. Sagan coming on the far right of the picture with a good turn as well. Boysenhagen holding on longer than most. Cavendish, Boysenhagen, Sagan, Greipel, the order over the line. Now Thomas Vauclair just come over the line. He was down in that crash as well. It's a little bit of a shame to get such a crash. And it's happened down the peloton as well when the sprinters were out front. Normally, riders stop racing outside the top 10 places. Let's have a look at the confirmation then of the stage result. 5.5 hours in the saddle today. Mark Cavendish gets his first win of this year's Tour. Boysenhagen second, Sagan third, Greipel fourth, and Roberto Ferrari of Lamprey in fifth place. Everybody in the race there will be given the same time. There he is, Simon Gerrans, his second day in yellow. He was 2 places behind Daryl Impey, but they're not worried about that. They've kept it on Simon Gerrans for another day. There's every possibility that Simon will take this lead right into the Pyrenees. Now,
This is always a very dangerous place to race. They're moving away from the beautiful town of Aix-en-Provence in the early part of the day. Riders already on their way, and as we've noticed, there is a lone breakaway off the front. I think everybody quite happy to let the lone riders survive. Moving away through Les Baux de Provence, on their way down through Lunel before charging into Montpellier. But it's all about the profile. When you look at it today, this has got to be the most ideal profile for a sprinter. There's hardly a pimple on the horizon here this afternoon. It should be fast and furious, and it could split up with the wind down towards the end.
Yes, and it could be the last few days before the sprinters are seen again after today's stage, because we're starting to move very close now to the High Pyrenees. The lone breakaway, Mate, having a chat with everybody. He's been left on his own out there. Boy, he's going to fry, Todd.
No question about it. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll get it back to you for the live call in a moment. Turn to my colleague, Bob Roll. Mate's probably not going to survive. That's a pretty safe bet there. How do you see this one shaking down? The guy showed us the profile. It's set up perfectly once again for the sprinters.
And I think that's why we only see one rider with the courage to go out and make an attack like that. Most of the peloton expecting a field sprint. A lot of riders in the peloton, they have specific jobs on a stage like this. The teammates of the sprinters will be saving themselves for the lead out, and the GC contenders want to stay safe.
Staying safe is the key today in stage number 6. Right now, we want to give you a feel of what it's like out there on the open road, the conditions, the wind, and everything else. And we check in with our man on the bike, Steve Perino.
Well, Todd, I can tell you the wind's already starting to kick up. Certainly nowhere near the 43 miles an hour they're predicting. But as if it wasn't dangerous enough sounding today, it's been dangerous so far. I checked in at the start. It's kind of like a MASH unit to see what happened, at least with Jurgen van der Broek of Lotto Belisol. Of course, he's not starting. And the story there, they had to draw 85 cc's of blood that was in behind his kney. I happen to know, like, from the doctor, 50 cc's of blood is incredible pain. 85 cc's. They knew that there was no way he's going to be able to continue on because of the damage done to his knee. Obviously, he's going to get checked out now to find out exactly what it is. But Jurgen van der Broek got up on the rollers this morning because he was feeling okay last night and just couldn't move the knee. And the doctor said, that's it. So unfortunately, he is out.
Thank you very much, Steve. Remember Jurgen van der Broek finishing 4th last year in the Tour. Well, they've got under 90 miles still to go in the hot sun. And we want to remind you to keep up with the Tour de France. You need the most advanced digital experience of its kind.
The journey across France speeds on today, stage 6, as we move away from Aix-en-Provence to Montpellier, staying in the far south or west of France today as we now edge forward and closer to the Pyrenees on Saturday.
Well, one man, a brave man, making a lonely move off the front end of the main field, but it's no surprise at all to see the team that are controlling the peloton being Orica Green Edge. They believe that they can keep their man, Simon Gerrans, in the lead of this race, quite possibly all the way down to the Pyrenees at the weekend. But at the weekend, there'll be a massive change in the overall standings of the hierarchy.
And the man has broken away right from the gun today. Nobody offered any resistance. In fact, they went slower the moment he attacked. Is Luis Mate, a Spanish rider on the French Cofidis team. Let's have a look first of all at our Palmer's Cocoa Butter formula for men. This is the current weather, 88 degrees Fahrenheit. A lovely day, hottest so far. Winds at 17 miles an hour but are rising, forecast sunny all the way. And in this part of the world, if the winds blow as crosswinds, they can tear the heart out of the peloton.
Yes, there are two very famous winds in this part of the world. First of all, the Mistral, which howls down the Rhone Valley, north to south. And when it rains, when it blows, it can blow as much as 40 miles an hour. The other wind is the Tramontana. But I can tell you today, the most important thing will be the Mistral down towards the end.
Coming across the country from north-south, and we're looking at the where we've been, and it's going to take a little while to get to where we're going today because they're hardly going too quickly. The further we go, the flatter the roads get as we go down to Montpellier, a town we've visited on 30 occasions before. A little bit of an English history to it. It might be an omen for Mark Cavendish. He was the last stage winner when he came here back in 2011. And Barry Hoban, another British rider, won 8 stages of the Tour de France in his period. He won back in 1974. So there's the yellow jersey of Simon Gerrans as he now rides proudly with his Orica Green Edge team all around him. So while we watch the riders chasing one man at the moment, let's have a look at our Cadillac performance predictions. This is when the experts are supposed to be right, but largely we're always wrong. I've got 5 points so far. Paul has 6. Bob is on the board now with a great win. He's got 4 yesterday. And Scott is very, very consistent and taken the lead, Scott Moninger. So let's see how we've all picked up today. Surprise for me too on this 4th of July. Mark Cavendish for me, Peter Sagan for Paul, Marcel Kittel for Bob, and Andre Greipel. Sprinters all, so no breakaway. 11 points for the British team of Bill and Paul, and 11 points equal. That's a good way to start the day, especially on Independence Day. So as we watch the peloton, looking as though they're going downhill slightly here, judging by the speed. Let's check in again with Steve Perino. Steve.
Phil, I was going to give you a little more news from the MASH unit, the injury report from BMC. Of course, they've got 4 riders that have been in crashes so far. Van Garderen yesterday, Gilbert on the first day, Bookwalter yesterday, and of course Michael Schär. And Schär is really the one that's in the most pain, and you all saw the crash. And what the doctor explained to me was that as he went out of the bike and over the bars, he ejected directly vertically out of the pedals. And of course, you know that they're not supposed to release that way, at least without a little bit of strain, and the strain went on the patellar tendon, so that's the concern for him today as he tries to ride himself back into form. Max Testa, the doctor, also noted that back in 2011 when Cadel Evans won the Tour, he said he didn't even break open a box of Band-Aids. This year, on this day, he's already into about his 10th meter of bandages.
Thanks, Steve. You know, Paul, this is the case, isn't it? We get a lot of injuries on the opening weeks now of the modern Tours de France.
Yeah, well, the problem is that everybody is so nervous, and for years I've been saying in commentary, you want to ride in the first 15 to 20 positions, but the problem is now everybody wants to ride in the first 15 to 20 positions, so they take a lot more risks to get there. You've got Team Sky trying to look after Froome. You've got Team BMC trying to move Cadel Evans up there. But at the end of the day, the road is only so wide. There's only enough room for so many people, so I think you do find a lot of people taking risks in the first week of the Tour, and that's why it has become that little bit more dangerous.
Well, for Garmin Sharp, of course, they've got last year's winner of the Giro d'Italia, the Canadian rider Hejjedal. He continues, but he has a diagnosed cracked rib. So he's going to be in pain probably for the rest of this Tour, should he make it all the way to Paris. He is the breakaway of Luis Mate, who's on the way to... I thought he was waiting earlier, but it looks like he's going to have a little go again. He turned pro back in 2008. Rides for the French Cofidis team, although his professional life began out in a small team in Spain, Andalusia. And he's only ever won 2 races. The last time he won was a stage of the Route du Sud, which is going in the direction we're racing today, over towards Bordeaux, that race. That was in June when he won the 4th day back in 2011.
Yeah, well, at 29 years of age, he's been a professional, as you said, Phil, since 2008, but he is actually getting pulled back into the main field because of that tempo being set on the front end of the pack by Orica Green Edge. Orica Green Edge are in an unbelievable position at the start of this Tour. It's their second Tour as an Australian representative team. Last year, they didn't manage to open up their bank account, but this year they've had an incredible start with a stage victory going to Simon Gerrans and the win in the team time trial, and then all of a sudden they lead this bike race as well, and theoretically it could go either way. Simon Gerrans losing a separated on points from his South African teammate, 7 points or 7 places from the top end of the overall standings.
Little smile for the television here. It's all right. He makes it look very easy. He's a top professional, let's face it. But, you know, in the first hour of racing today, where he has led the whole way, because he broke away as soon as the flag dropped, he covered 39 hours, so that's just off 25 miles an hour. And yet he makes it look quite easy. But I think he's easing off. He's waiting for them more or less to come up to him. And that's why he's smiling, because he would have liked a group to join him, as we see so often. 5, 6 riders coming up, then they can get on with it. But when you're on your own and you're planning on riding such a long distance of 110 miles, not the best thing to do on a day of the Tour de France.
I got a Boston Pizza rib sauce steak.
A chance to see how this originally medieval village is just perched on the top. This man, formerly the French national champion Nasser Bouhanni from Épinal in the eastern part of France, he's having a very difficult time now. If they don't slow down after the descent of this climb, the Col de Vallette, I don't think he'll see the main field again, and he could be staring elimination in the face.
Yeah, it's the only climb of the day. It's really the only big ripple of the day on this route. It gets flatter from now on. The wind will not be his friend, no. They'll edge him up the hill if they can. Well, for a Frenchman, he's feeling very sad to be alone at the back of the field here, but the crowd appreciate the effort.
It's tough, you know, Phil. 22 years of age. Yesterday he suffered with a gastric problem. Then he crashed down towards the end when he was hoping to get himself up into the race in the sprint. He's almost 2 minutes off the back end of the main field, and he's going to need something very, very special to happen in the race if he wants to make contact with the peloton again before we get to Montpellier. But it just accentuates the fact that I've mentioned on a couple of occasions. Nobody ever wants to abandon the Tour de France. It's such a special event, and you look at the speed they're taking in on the descent there. There's a lovely little hotel over there down to the right-hand side, and not too far away from that hotel is an 18th century chateau, which is now privately owned after it was renovated in 1999.
At the moment, he's hoping that this peloton slows down and he gets back on. And let's hope he can. He's the 4th youngest rider in the race, Nacer Bouhanni, at just 22 years of age. He's just, he'll be 23 the few days after the Tour de France finishes. Let's hope he gets to see Paris as the race goes on. No more hills today, but there'll be some fast racing. Well, one thing is for sure now, the speed here these riders are applying is putting the winner in the first 15 to 20 at the moment. The rest are actually just hanging on, and we've seen some of the teammates now have done their big turn, slide to the field. I just saw the Polish time trial champion Bodnar go off. He's a teammate of Sagan. He'd done his pacemaking at the front. He's now behind the race, underneath 3 kilometers to go. At these speeds, about 2 minutes and 55 seconds to the finish today. As these boys now, and I take my hat off to Argo Shimano, this is a very young team, and they're trying now to get Marcel Kittel up for the sprint win.
Well, we talk about all the tactics of different teams. Teams come to the Tour de France for different reasons. You've got the Team Sky looking for Chris Froome. Argos Shimano have come here for just one reason. Well, two, I suppose. You've got Marcel Kittel and John Degenkolb. They've got 2 very, very good sprinters. They've built a team for the flat stages. This is an important thing for them. They've already got 1-stage victory under their belt, and they have now got control inside of 2.5 kilometers to go.
But they just lost another man, and that's one man less to take them to the line. So these riders are going to do 500-meter strings at the front here to try and keep Kittel off it until the last 200. They're just checking each other out to see who's breaking. Interesting to see this by Argus Shimano, because the other teams are allowing them to do it just now as we're heading under 2 kilometers.
But queuing up behind them now is the Lotto Belisol lead-out train. At the back end of that train is Andre Greipel. On Andre Greipel's wheel, you can just see every now and again popping around the green jersey. That is Peter Sagan.
I think Adam Hansen is in there at the moment from Queensland, the Australian, on Lotto Belisol. As there's now a little move coming up on the outside, back on Soleil. Sky sitting in the middle. They'll be trying to get Boysenhagen through. The yellow jersey of Gerrans is just obscured on our right of the picture here, and he's in a very, very good position, and with him is Daryl Impey.
Well, they've got Lotto Belisol controlling now, just a little bit further back, ducking and diving without a teammate to look after him now is Mark Cavendish. He's going to have to freelance this afternoon as they go inside of 1 kilometer to go.
Under the bridge, that caused the picture break-up. They come out the other side. They still continuing at just about 40 miles an hour here now as Lotto Belisol are trying to wind this one up for Andre Greipel. He's tucked into 4th wheel. The team are in perfect position. Mark Cavendish, as Paul said, he's going to have to do some dodging, and this is not looking good at 500 meters to go. Cavendish is now, Stegman's on his wheel. Stegman's in blue. He's trying to lead Mark Cavendish out the mist. Kittel is trying to come, but is this going to be the day for Greipel? He's going to have to break pretty soon. He's leaving it as late as he can, but Sagan is locked on to Greipel now. Cavendish is locked on to Sagan. They are coming up at 250 meters to go. Now Cavendish is going on the shoulders of Sagan. Greipel on the left of the picture. Is this going to be Andre, the man we call the gorilla first today? As Andre Greipel comes towards the line, he gets his desserts in the end. Sagan gets 2nd, possibly Kittel 3rd. Cav may have been there in 4th place. When he got the right shot, he made it count.
Well, the thing about Andre Greipel, he has over the last couple of seasons developed a very, very good lead-out train, and today it worked perfectly for him. Cavendish lost a few teammates on the run-in towards the finish, and Greg Henderson there throwing his arms up in the air. He knew at this point that his teammate Andre Greipel, the man that we nicknamed the Gorilla because of the large carcass he carries across the line, gets himself that win. And look at the chaos behind him. Cavendish had to freelance it. He was looking for a way round, but he just could not quite get the gap. He knew at this point that he was beaten, and psychologically he started to turn off the speed. Locked into the slipstream there of Greipel is Peter Sagan in the green jersey, and Kittel just comes past Cavendish there, giving himself the third place finish, and Cavendish in fourth.
So he loses a little bit of green jersey ground that he made up earlier on today, but I don't think he's too worried about that at the moment. He wanted the stage win like he had in 2011, but it wasn't to be for Cavendish today. Maybe that chase back blunted the speed just a little bit. He was also balked as he made his move with the slowing down of Greg Henderson, I think, there. So the sprint results, a great win for Andre Greipel. That's the famous rugby field down there for the Coupe du Monde, or World Cup. Now we're looking here at Brakovic. A teammate's gone back to bring him home. It's been an unlucky tour so far for Astana. They've lost 2 of their 9 riders already, and Brakovic will be examined as soon as he gets to the finishing line. There's Marcel Kittel, who finished right up there. At least he got the better of Mark Cavendish today in the sprint, but it wasn't for first place. Let's have a look then at the stage result today. A battle of sprinters royale. Greipel, Sagan, Kittel, Cavendish, and a nice intrusion there by Juan Jose Lobato. If you remember, he was in the first breakaway of the tour on the island of Corsica, and was the first leader in the King of the Mountains. He produced a 5th place finish. Alexander Kristoff, the Katusha rider, another good sprinter. Rojas, Danny Van Poppel, the youngest rat man in the race for 66 years at 19 years of age. Roberto Ferraro 9th, and Dumoulin is completing the top 10. And Daniel Impey in 13th place. Now the next thing is, where is the yellow jersey position of Gerrans? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We need who's finished 20th and 21st, because that will be crucial as to the destiny of the next Maillot Jaune. It could be we're going to crown a South African as the first ever wearer of the Maillot Jaune, but we'll wait and see on that one. There's no doubt who the winner was today, and Andre Greipel, a very popular man around the world, has got the victory today. He's had his moments and his sadnesses. Left standing on the road, remember, on stage 1. No gears left on his bike. Today, uses the highest gear he's got on his bike to win the sprint. The Griller roars.